Answer the multiple choice questions for From Bartering to Bills, the History of Money. So our questions here, our first question is reading, what is the best meaning of the word values as it is used in paragraph 4 of the article? Now, pretty much we know appreciates and enjoys. The word value, if you value something, it's important to you and you would expect it. Not exactly expect something you value, right? But let's look. So now if we look at our paragraph 4, we want to find our word value. The first money developed was commodity money. Commodities are things that everyone values enough to accept as payment. So depending on what the local people valued, it can change. Because here it's going to say everyone valued barley. So the grain was used for trade. So now, if you valued it, you wouldn't necessarily expect it or collect it. So we're between A and B. And I guess if we're talking about barley in this specific paragraph, people probably enjoyed barley, right? But they might have not everyone would enjoy it, right? So I would say something here, if you value it, it means you appreciate it. You don't necessarily get enjoyment from salt or barley, but it is something you would appreciate because it is useful and you could use it for other things. So for number 22, our best definition is going to be appreciates. Next one, what is the main way the phrase a prickly situation in paragraph 6 helps the reader understand the article? So the prickly situation one was about the fish hooks, right? And it's talking about how carrying the fish hooks could be a prickly situation. Because if you're carrying all these fish hooks, and if you know what a fish hooks looks like, it would be fish hooks. Not very good to have stuffed into your pockets, right? So they're saying that they had to, because in the next paragraph, right, it talks about how different parts of the world needed standard money. So standard would mean everyone has the same thing. It's like, so if you took a standardized test, that would mean that everyone in your country or your state was sitting for the same exact test at the same time. Given the same time, that would be what you call standardized. It means the same. So when we look back at the fish hook situation, by showing that some commodities were often difficult to find, they were a bit difficult to find, I guess, but let's look. Highlighting the idea that objects often had different values. The prickly situation part would be the part about people having problems carrying it, right? Provide a reason why a common money system was necessary by indicating that some commodities were rarely useful to all people. Now, if we're talking about a prickly situation, none of these really show something about that specifically. But when we're talking about understanding the article, at the end of this article, right, it ends up talking about the American dollar and how in the end Americans came up with their dollar system. So if we're talking about the whole article, fish hooks technically wouldn't be difficult to find. Highlighting the idea that objects often had different values. They sort of had different values, but only depending on like where the person would be. Because fish hooks wouldn't be that valuable to somebody who like lived out in the middle of nowhere not near any water. For this one, it would be C. By providing a reason why a common money system was necessary. And the reason being that people were going out with fish hooks. These people had 500-pound stones. These weren't ways that you could like travel with your money. It would be difficult to travel with that. So therefore, they required a standard money that could be easy to carry. hard to destroy, and valuable to everyone. So 23 has to be C. And the next one, how do the details in paragraph 5 through 8 help develop a central idea? So if we look at paragraphs 5 through 8, those are the ones we were just really looking at, right? Where 1,000 years ago, the Chinese were using cowrie shells. Salt was used, but then we know that salt could be tricky because it's water soluble. Well, it would, if it got wet, it would just be in the water. You would have salt water. Different parts of the world began to see the need for some kind of standard money. And then paragraph 8 talks about the first coins. So if we go comparing money in ancient cultures with the money that people use today, they didn't really do that, right? They didn't compare money used today. That wasn't until the end of the article. By showing how different people tried to develop effective money systems. It definitely showed us how different countries or regions were trying to develop effective systems of money. Let's see what the others. We have, by explaining why different objects were often considered to be valuable. We don't have much explanation. Like, this it was valuable, I guess, because the king's head was on it, but for the stones, it doesn't really get into the reasoning why these stones are valuable to these people. So I'm not seeing a lot of explanation. By describing how the process of making coins has changed very little over time. Definitely doesn't say anything about that. It just says how the first coins. In fact, I would almost say melting a mixture of metals is really how coins are still made today. So it can't be D. So for this one, we have to have, which one? By showing how different people tried to develop effective systems of money. We had the fish hooks, we had the stones, we had the cowrie shells, and then we had the mixed coins with the king's face on it. So for 24, our answer here would be B. And then we have, read the sentence from paragraph 3 of the article. Ancient people needed something with a value everyone agreed on, money. Which detail from the article best describes the most important feature of money? All right, well, a deal was final when both people agreed that it was a fair trade. Kind of. Everyone valued barley, so the grain was used for trade. It did become that, right? It had to be valuable to everyone, easy to carry, and hard to destroy. This one is looking like it could be nice, right? Heavy string of coins could now be exchanged for a single sheet of paper. That was just about how the Chinese had their coins and then they turned it into paper, right? So for this one, it's got to be C. Because C literally is the point of the article. It's the history of how people went from bartering with random goods to one standard currency of money that's valuable to everyone, easy to carry, and hard to destroy. So number 25 had to be C. What is most likely the author's opinion about bartering? Bartering is useful in some situations and will likely continue in the future. Bartering is still an option when people live in smaller communities. Bartering is now mainly used by children as a way to exchange food. Bartering will likely increase as people use less physical money. Now, if we go back to our ending here, the author left us with this idea that many people still use the ancient system of bartering. It doesn't exactly say specific to kids, right? But he does say about adults can exchange cookies and chips too. And then at the end, some experts think that one day bills and coins will no longer be used. Instead, all transactions will be made electronically. So if we look, it seems as though, well, he says bartering is an option when people live in smaller communities. He didn't mention anything about how big the community would be, so it can't be B. And it can't really be C, because that was just, like we said, adults can do that too. Bartering will likely increase as people use less physical money. That's not what he said. He actually said that there'll be dollars and bills will be away because there'll be more electronic money transactions. And a transaction is just the act of like selling or buying something. So he doesn't say that bartering will increase. He says it's still useful and will likely continue, but not something like it's going to increase or replace anything. It's just useful and it will likely continue. So for this one, it has to be A. And that would be our multiple choice questions for bartering, the history of money.